Oh, good. Hi, my name is Linda Bushnell. So I'm going to be moderating this panel, but first I wanted just to, so this panel is on writing CPS career proposals. Also, we have, it's formatted as a panel. So I'll just give a few remarks at the beginning, and then we're going to hear from 4 researchers who have had career or currently have career awards. And then we'll open up for Q&A, because I want to make this more interactive to get you involved if you have any questions. Also, a lot of you, you may be like me, too old to write a career proposal because you're already got promoted or maybe, but this is good for you to give advice to younger people in your departments, right? So a lot of people are interested, even postdocs and senior grad students are interested in this. I went, as Jack mentioned yesterday, he ran the first CPS Rising Stars workshop at UVA, and I went to that and I talked about these tips for writing a career. I just made up one slide here, but I have a whole list of things, a little bit more detail. Happy to share with you, give tips out, help people work on drafts for career proposals. Anyway, so we'll probably hear a lot of these, some of these tips coming from our speakers in this session. I'll just quickly go through these. So one thing, and I think Dave mentioned some of this earlier when he was talking, so looking at, if you're writing a career, should this be your first one first proposal to NSF? Well, I guess that depends, right? If you're a good writer or if you want to participate in a regular CPS grant first or write a proposal first before doing the career. I've seen it be successful both ways. The proposal has to come across as being part of CPS program, right? So you really have to ask that question, why should it belong to the CPS program, not one of the core programs? I think a hard thing I've seen also is some people don't know where to send their career proposal, so make sure that you talk to a program officer. So that's really, actually I have that in the first one, but if you're interested, talk to us at NSF. That's part of our job at NSF is to talk to people. So we're happy to talk to you one-on-one, Zoom, that's kind of how we do it now, and give you a lot of good tips one-on-one by talking to someone first. So as with any CPS proposal, it has to address CPS core science, right? So what you're proposing in your career is similar to what you would propose any type of CPS proposal, right? But it's written in the career format, which is different because it's 5 years and it has your effort as a student for a whole 5 years, right? You can support like a whole PhD student probably on this. So make sure that you address the core CPS research, right? So you have to also think about who's reviewing, right? So I know that a lot of people writing careers, you're usually younger, starting out in your faculty. Think about the people who are on the panel reviewing your proposal. They're not going to be experts in exactly what you do. So you're writing for a little bit general audience. Make sure you tell a good story, right? Get them as excited as you are about your research. When I read a proposal and I can see the passion from the person writing, then I know it's a good proposal, right? You have a good story, you're passionate about what you want to do. So then I think the next bullet is probably you have to write it as a career proposal, which is really a 5-year career plan. Hopefully it's beyond 5 years and you don't retire after 5 years by getting all the money from NSF, right? You want to keep going in this area in CPS. We want you to be here every year at these CPS PI meetings and participating in CPS IoT Week and writing in journals that are related to CPS research. It's different, right? So we're going to hear from people who have been successful in writing these. And as I said, we're all happy to talk to you about why is it different? It's really a plan. You have a vision. We can go more specifics later. But it really it can't just be, a 3-year project. You think about writing a small or medium proposal, this is different because it's really your career plan and what you want to do in your career as your research, right? Looking at broader impacts is important. So NSF, the proposals are evaluated on intellectual merit, broader impact. That's pretty much it for career, right? But you also have to show how your research is integrated into your education plan, right? You're proposing a certain type of research, but it also has to impact your, included into your education plan, right? So those are kind of tightly integrated. Be realistic, right? Dave always says that he likes to see ambitious proposals, but you got to be you got to be realistic. What can you do, over this time? And also participate on panels. So if you haven't been on a panel, send me email. Definitely, actually, after this meeting, it'd be hard. It's hard for me to keep track when people ask me, but send me email. Say I want to be on a CPS panel, right? So then I have a list of potential panelists, and every time we go to make a panel, I look at that list first, and I say, oh yeah, I met them at the PI meeting, or I met them at the Rising Star workshop. Let's get them on a panel, right? And it's a great experience if you haven't been on a panel. You're on a panel with people who have been on panels who even learn more, right? So, and we always kind of mix it up that way. Anyway, so I want to go on, I'm going to turn it over to the floor to our speakers. So we have in our panel, we have Fatima Afka from Clemson University. We have Homa Alemzadeh from University of Virginia. We have Andrew Clark from Washington University, St. Louis, and Simone Silvestri from University of Kentucky. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and then after they talk about their career research that they're doing, and we'll open up for Q&A. Okay, thank you. So let's hear from Fatima. We'll go in just in order here. Fatima, you can go first, and you have, I think she has slides, right? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to present a very quick review of my career proposal and also the CPS proposal that we have and are related. So the focus of our project is using autonomous and semi-autonomous UAVs in disaster management. So there are a lot of advances in terms of technology, sensing, autonomy, and communication, and how we can take advantage of those and bring the UAVs to the actual field of disasters, especially what we are focusing on is wildfires. So in our team, we are addressing several concerns related to autonomous UAVs, going from communication, distributed computing, task planning, and task management. I think what makes our project different is looking at these different aspects at the same time and evaluating and validating these technologies in actual fields of wildfires. So the first question for using autonomous UAVs or semi-autonomous UAVs in remote areas where usually these wildfires are happening in forest areas is communication. So when you are taking that drones to those areas, there's basically no communication available. The common Wi-Fi communication has a very low range and is usually contested and not a very reliable communication technology. So we are looking at the possibility of using LTE or 5G communication for drones, for both payload communication and command and control. So right now, UAVs are banned from using LTE and most of the 5G bands, just because they're going to cause a lot of interference to the base stations and the regular cellular users that we have. So different agencies, they are looking at the possibility of how we can take advantage of 5G and 4G for drone communication, because the infrastructure is there, it's very reliable. With having the SIM cards or remote ID identification, you can have a very good idea about where the UAVs are located, and that's going to enhance the security of using UAVs. So that seems to be the future for having beyond visual line of sight operation of the drones. So the figure that you see on the bottom is from the test that we had in northern Arizona and flying the UAVs in the area that is basically no coverage for regular UEs. But when we are flying the UAVs, because they have a strong line of sight, they can have coverage from multiple base stations in the areas. We are working with T-Mobile, and we are looking at the coverage of 5G in different states for UAV. So that's one of the practical aspects of our project. And now we are designing new mission planning for the UAVs, how have methods that are communication aware, meaning that they understand the 3D map and coverage for the UAVs. They understand the amount of interference that is going to be caused to the base stations and the UEs. At the same time, they're optimizing the path of the UAVs or the task that these UAVs are taking. We understand that 4G or 5G is not going to be necessarily the solution that is going to be available in very remote areas. So we are looking at alternative solutions like Wi-Fi mesh or using satellite communication for backbone communication. So our idea is how we can have multiple drones and how we can have a hierarchical architectures, like having fixed wing UAVs that they can fly higher to talk to the satellites and like relay the information from like quadcopters to the base stations if there is 4G or 5G or to a satellite. The other aspect of our project, which is part of my career and also the CPS collaborative award that we have, is taking this fleet of UAVs in actual prescribed fires and wildfires and use them for wildfire detection and monitoring. So you'll be surprised that the way that currently wildfire is being detected, it's either by these sensors that they are not very sustainable or accurate, or using the satellite images that they have like 2 hours of lag, or they are not very frequently available. So what happens is that wildfires, they're usually being missed at earlier stages. By the time that they are being detected, they have been already spread in the forest areas and they may have been out of the control. So they may cause like mega fires just because they have not been detected in earlier stages. So what we do, we're designing patrol drones that they can monitor the forest areas and detect early stage fires for us. We are addressing the communication, autonomy, and the limited power and flight time that these UAVs have, and try to fly multiple drones in remote areas to be able to detect these fires. So we're actually one of the only groups that have made this arrangement after 4 years working with USDA and US Forest Services and can fly the drones during the actual fires. What we realized that is there are no data sets available, or there are no images collected by UAVs that are available to public because nobody has the permission to do this flight. So the community, they don't have any sources or any ground truth to look at these fire detection or like drone-based path planning techniques. So one thing that we realized is we should collect some of these data sets and make them available for the community. So the first data set that we collected, we call it Flame 1. It was collected in northern Arizona during pile fires. So pile fires, they're basically very small prescribed fires that everything is under control, nothing can go wrong. And that's how we started in 2020. And even for this one, we had months of collaboration with different groups to make the flight happen. So beside the data set, we have published multiple open source codes for fire detection, scheduling of the drones, flame detection, and we have labeled all of these images with 3 experts so they can be reliable ground truth for the community to use and evaluate their methods. So this was a small pile fires, and most of the images were RGB, but RGB images, they don't have a good accuracy to recognize the difference between smoke or cloud, and they can be easily having like reduced quality when the environment is very smoky. So in Flame 2 that we collected in 2021, we are collecting side-by-side RGB and IR images, and we are labeling both of them continuously like a cross-way labeling to address the limitation that RGB images have. And we wanted to go beyond just fire detection. We wanted to start providing data sets for fire modeling. So this is actually one of the tests that my student did in Oregon a few weeks ago. And for this test, he was camping in forest area for 5 nights straight to just like get the permission to fly the drones. So we are collecting pre-burn and during burn and also after burn images. So we can do fire detection, we can do fire monitoring, we can provide information for weather information or like point cloud or like altitude and type of trees that you can get there, and do fire modeling and also assessment of fire and how the fire has impacted the forest using the afterburn images. So this is the 3rd year of our project, but our plan is to collect Flame 3 data set that is not only in one single state. We are now collecting data set in California, Oregon, Nevada, Florida, Arizona. And this is a collaboration between multiple groups from different universities and USDA and US Forest Services to have this capability. So Flame 2 is also Grant Root labeled for fire detection and fire bonding, and it was published a month ago, so it can be used for people that are interested in like computer vision or fire modeling. So this is some of the results that we have for modeling the spread of fire using satellite images, and we are hoping that Flame 3 is going to be a data set that for the first time people can use drone collected images for fire modeling, because drones, they can offer much higher spatial and temporal resolution. And we are also working on coordination, task management, coalition formation, and finding the optimal location for these drones. So if we have multiple drones that each have very limited capabilities, how we should locate them in the area to have a good field of view, or like having continuous operation. So last but not least, I wanted to acknowledge all of the collaborators and people that are working on this project. Without their collaboration, the project cannot go any further. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Hi everyone. My career project focuses on context-aware runtime safety assurance in medical, human, cyber-physical systems. As we all know, medical CPS are becoming pervasive in our lives in different clinical and personalized settings. And similar to other CPS, they're basically at the core, they have controllers that are integrating sensors and actuators. But what is actually really makes the MCPS different from other CPS is the humans in the loop. Both the patients that are being treated by the devices and the human operators are operating the controllers to treat the patients. So in addition to the traditional challenges that we are seeing for all the CPS, like increasing complexity and connectivity of the software, using AI for control, and various timing and resource constraints, here we are having like specific issues because of the involvement of humans in the loop. One of the things that's specific to MCPS is that medical field is very driven by the expertise. The operators of the devices are usually experts that go to medical school, and they often operate based on established standards and protocol guidelines, workflows in order to supervise and control the devices. And with recent pandemics, we see increasing use of or interest in teleoperation of these devices, which raises new challenges. On the other hand, because of the patients in the loop and the variety of the profiles, physiological and behavioral dynamics, design and verification of these systems is very challenging. Also like the fact that these human operators are actually involved at various levels. If you actually think of like SAE levels of autonomy, you can think of similar levels for MCPS. These are examples from 3 different systems that we use in our research for that range from like level 0 of autonomy, like we have humans deeply involved, they actually do the actuation. The AI kind of is providing them just guidance for control. Level 1, which is teleoperation, that the human and the controllers are actually together, they're doing the semi-autonomous kind of control. And then the fully autonomous, or level 2, that we have something like artificial pancreas systems. Similar to other kind of CPS, we have a variety of like security and safety vulnerabilities that might lead to kind of adverse events. But here specifically, I want to again emphasize the role of humans. So unintentional human errors, or like errors in the user interfaces that might actually cause adverse events or harm to patient. So in our research, we try to kind of approach this problem from a safety perspective. So regardless of what is the source of the kind of the problem, is it an accidental or malicious event, and each layer of the system, we are concerned about when these errors or attacks are actually propagated and become unsafe control actions, that if they're executed in the physical layer, they might lead to safety hazards and then adverse events or harm to the patient. And there are lots of evidence, real data from FDA databases and vulnerability databases that show that the problems are actually getting worse. Like we have increasing number of recalls, vulnerabilities reported for the devices that are used in the hospitals that might affect the safety of the medical CPS. For our project, one of our main case studies is a teleoperated system for robotic surgery. These systems combine multiple human operators with mechanical and electronic components and cyber layer, but they are not fully autonomous yet. They're actually semi-autonomous. One of the challenges is that there is no haptic feedback. So the operator actually just has a limited vision feedback and then operates the robot, which has some level of very little amount of autonomy to kind of treat the patient. And as a device connected to a hospital with like the possibility of teleoperation, there are lots of studies recently shown that there are possibility of unintentional human errors, attacks that might actually target the device, various software, hardware, mechanical issues that might impact the safety of these systems. So when we look at the existing techniques that are out there for MCPS, for the safety assurance techniques, the guidelines and standards are mostly focusing on offline techniques that are like based on hazard analysis, model-based design, and verification. The problem is that when we look at the data, these are usually inadequate in detecting residual faults that skip this kind of techniques and then in preventing adverse events. On the other hand, there are lots of work in the CPS literature on anomaly detection and recovery, but they usually focus only on the fully autonomous systems and cyber physical layers. There is less consideration of the humans, role of human operators, and the patient dynamics in the loop. And on the other hand, there is this trend that there are like techniques that are solely model-driven or based on knowledge, fixed rules, guidelines, models that are linear, non-linear, or there are techniques that are machine learning oriented. And we see that both these approaches actually have issues with generalization, robustness, and transparency. So in our research, we want to address these challenges by proposing a solution for context-aware runtime safety assurance that can complement these offline efforts. So the goal is to augment controllers of MCPS with safety engines that can basically monitor the actuator commands and sensors and then do preemptive detection of unsafe control actions that if they're executed in the physical layer, they might lead to the hazards and then use this to prevent adverse events and harm to patients. The main kind of goal of the project is basically we are proposing an integrated model and data-driven approach to solve the gaps in the kind of the problems with models and data and bridge the gap between the offline formal modeling and runtime monitoring. And then we consider in the design of the safety engines both the domain knowledge from the human experts, medical doctors, and human cyber physical context, as well as like operator and patient profiles that adds variability to their safety monitoring. And the goal is to kind of come up with design principles for these safety engines that can be applicable to beyond medical, to robotics and other autonomous systems. And we actually show some case studies that some of these techniques can be applied, for example, to autonomous vehicles. So our research is around 3 main thrusts, and then all these are actually the main idea here is that in addition to the cyber and physical modeling analysis, how we can bring in the notion of human layer. And what I call this is operational context, meaning that how we can model and specify the operational workflows or guidelines that the medical professionals have, and also consider the intent, style, or expertise level of these human operators when we are deciding if an action is safe or unsafe, because a different procedure might have a different set of safety properties, or a different expert might have a different set of safe or unsafe actions. And then we want to combine this with the traditional kind of methods on like just cyber kind of monitoring, then considering control system and software states, as well as physical context, but adding to that variability in patient profiles and dynamics. So the Trust 1 will focus on safety, context specification, and learning. So we propose a formal framework for a specification of this human cyber physical safety context. So we use, we actually inspired by control theoretic hazard analysis. We develop a formal framework that medical experts and safety analysts can specify the properties for the unsafe control actions based on this multidimensional system context and generate template temporal logic formulas that can be used for hazard prediction and mitigation. And since we know about all these kind of challenges with the specification and model-based approaches, we also combine this with data-driven approaches. So basically we refine further these formulas with, by learning from data, similar to learning from demonstration from the talk that we saw earlier. But the data that we use is both faulty and fault-free patient-specific data that we create synthetically, and or adversarial training of the models that we have using this kind of safety specifications. And one of the kind of, again, novel aspects of this sort of modeling and specification is this sort of operational context, how we can add that and the relationship of that to the cyber and physical layers. So far, this project has started in May, and so far we have focused on, for a case study of surgical robots, on modeling operational context in surgery. So we actually modeled this as a kind of hierarchical structure, how we can break down a procedure into steps, tasks, gesture, and lower level motion primitives that they can be analyzed for safety and specified, be used for specifying safety properties. One of the, yeah, sure. And so far we have modeled this, and the Trust 2 will focus on techniques for inference of this human cyber-physical context, and using techniques for segmentation of the tasks and recognition of the actions in real time. We have developed a data set, aggregated data set that can provide more robust model training and validation methods for generalization of this kind of recognitions. And then we have techniques that we use multimodal data, both kinematics and vision, for context inference and detection in real time. And then the Trust 3 will focus on, once we know that the hazard is going to happen or predict the possibility of hazard, we want to use risk-aware response and mitigation by either providing feedback to the human operators to prevent the adverse events, or executing safe motion primitives to prevent the hazards. This research also has integrated education and outreach activities. The main focus is promoting participation of undergraduate researchers and K-12 students for research in engineering, robotics, and medicine. So far, we have developed modules for autonomous manipulation of robotic arm, which has been used for both a biometrics event that students do robotic programming for this, and a project in an CPS curriculum that the students program the robots for on top of the RTOS and TI microcontroller. Thank you. Sorry, I don't know about that.
All right, thank you. So I'm Andrew Clark with Washington University in St. Louis. I'll be presenting my career project on synthesis and control of cyber-resilient CPS. So it's been observed that the cyber interfaces introduced by sort of smart infrastructures create new attack surfaces, and we see these ranging from relatively small scale with spoofing attacks on connected autonomous vehicles to attacks on larger industrial control systems, and even wider area sort of societal level attacks that could take down an entire power grid. So these sort of escalating attacks pose significant economic costs and safety risk. And what sort of the framework of this project, or the idea, is to not only try to prevent attacks from happening, but to recognize that some level of threats are inevitable, and how can systems continue to operate and function after a successful attack takes place. So this is the basic idea of cyber resilience. So at the center of the diagram, you have the basic notion of resilience, where you go from detecting an event to responding, recovering, and then securing against the same contingency happening in the future. And when in the CPS context, you also have that coupled with the physical dynamics and the specific kill chain or attack pattern being exploited by a persistent adversary. So within this model, the goal of this proposal is to develop foundations and algorithms to ensure that CPS provides safety, performance, and functionality, even when one or more of its constituent components is compromised. So just an overview of the project, we follow a sort of hierarchical approach to breaking down the problem. The first thrust focuses on resilient control. So how do we do real-time sort of nonlinear control when there may be attacks on, for instance, sensors and actuators in the system? At one level of abstraction higher, we have planning and synthesis problems, maybe on a slightly longer time scale with more complex objectives and specifications. And then one level higher than that, compositional approaches where you have multiple different subcomponents, some of which may be compromised, and being able to recover the functionality of those compromised components. So sort of starting with an example of the first type of problem. So we've looked at the problem of safe control of cyber-physical systems under attacks. A motivating example of this is to look at contexts where CPS rely on multimodal sensors. You can think of typical autonomous driving examples where you have camera, GPS, and so forth. And it's been demonstrated that adversaries can inject false data into these sensors, sometimes multiple sensors simultaneously. And by doing so, you could cause, for instance, a vehicle to believe that it's in a safe configuration to execute a lane change, and then actually that may cause some collision. So what we've looked at is how do we develop algorithms that have some provable guarantees on safety and reachability in the presence of these deliberate attacks. So our basic approach is illustrated here. The idea is to introduce a new class of control barrier functions, which we're calling as resilient barrier functions. And so the basic principle is that we can have multiple possible attack patterns that we know are feasible, but we don't know which one we're going to face. So we maintain a sort of different safety filter, i.e. in this case a control barrier function, associated with each attack pattern. And we attempt to, at each time step, come up with a single control input that ensures safety regardless of which attack pattern may be faced by the system. And since it may not be possible to have one input that ensures resilience against all of these different eventualities, we have a sort of conflict resolution block that aims to reconcile these. And we have some results on actually necessary and sufficient conditions for formally verifying that, that this is going to be feasible and ensure safety under any of the enumerated attack patterns. And so kind of building on that, we've in the past year or so been looking at a couple of emerging directions. One is sort of high dimensional sensors where it may not be entirely realistic to assume that this sensor can be completely compromised and an arbitrary input injected. So for example, a LiDAR sensor where you may only be able to impact a subset of the scanning area. And also in that context, you may have some side information in the form of a map of the region that you're operating in that can also be used to enhance resilience. And another problem that we've looked at, and this is actually a pending paper, is on safety verification of neural network controllers, particular neural control barrier functions, and ensuring that these controllers, that it may be learned but not readily interpretable, can in fact be verified as guaranteeing safety. So another class of problems that we've been looking at is ensuring cyber resilience in a sort of compositional context. So that for that, we've been looking at software restart-based methods for cyber resilience. So the basic idea of these methods is after an attack, either after an attack takes place or just in a periodic fashion, restart the system cyber components to a known safe state, and then hopefully rely on the sort of internal stability or inertia of the physical system to maintain safety. So we developed, along with collaborators, a framework for taking different resilient architectures of this type and sort of composing them together to develop safety guarantees for interconnected systems using these restart-based methods. And then one last problem that I'll touch on is at the higher level of abstraction when looking at planning under as in the keynote we saw this morning from Nejmia, the planning with temporal logic specifications. So we've been looking at how to incorporate deliberate cyber attacks into that modeling and planning framework. In particular, what I think is interesting in that topic is trying to model the information asymmetry between the attacker and the defending system that is sort of intrinsic to a lot of security problems, but may not be completely captured by most of the existing formal methods. So we've been looking at this sort of modeling work and also trying to overcome some of the cursive dimensionality and scalability challenges in the verification using discretization-free methods. So our education outreach activities, so this is a couple of them that I've done. So I give talks at the freshman seminar. These are all, I recently moved from WPI, so these are all activities that I was doing at WPI that I'm now reconstituting at a new institution. We do an annual public outreach event that just restarted post-COVID. And I've been working on undergraduate capstone projects, mainly on kind of implementing and demonstrating some of these things in hardware. And some of these are in collaboration with MITRE Corporation, which is good for providing kind of pipelines and helping students to find jobs. So that, I'll conclude the talk and thank my collaborators, and in particular the second row is the students who do a lot of the work and some of whom are going to be in the job market soon. So thanks, and thanks to the organizers.
Hello, everyone. I'll try to be quick so that we have some time for questions. So the title of my career proposal is Energy Management for Smart Residential Environments through Human-in-the-Loop Algorithm Design, and this was awarded a couple of years ago, in 2020. So the main motivation for this career proposal is the increase, I didn't do this. Okay, is the increase in residential energy consumption, which also accounts for a significant fraction of the overall energy consumption. Additionally, these days, there are new technologies that allows for, I'm not changing the slide. I don't know why the slide is changing. I'm not doing anything. I don't know. It shouldn't. Anyway, let's try to, it creates more dynamicity in the presentation. So, there are new technologies these days that allow for new energy management strategies that before were just not even thinkable. And these technologies include smart grids, advanced meter infrastructures, smart residential environments, Internet of Things appliances, smart thermostat, smart outlets, virtual power plants, etc. And so, for example, things that you can do with these new technologies is, for example, to realize some sort of very dynamic and specialized dynamic demand response strategies, trying to, for example, prevent blackouts. You can allow users to collect energy locally. This energy could be stored locally, used locally, or could even be sold to the grid, or even sold to other users within your microgrid or smart grid, etc. However, what we point out in this proposal is that recent approaches, and in general, approaches in this domain of smart energy management system for residential environments lack proper modeling and understanding of human behaviors. And there are social science studies that show that the lack of this modeling and understanding can result in unwanted behaviors, and these behaviors could include, for example, the lack of engagement, but even it can create behaviors that, for example, result in an increase in energy consumption over time, which of course what you wanted to avoid. And also it may result in a complete abandonment of this energy management system because they have not been designed with the human behavior, human perception in mind. So what we want to do with this proposal is to overcome this limitation by design algorithmic solution, optimization solution, etc., which, okay. It refuses to go back, yeah? Okay, there you go. So that specifically take into account the human behaviors, perceptions, and psychological processes. And to do this, we use basically machine learning as a bridge between the Internet of Things appliances and the human behavior that we use in order to learn the human behavior and feed this in our optimization strategy and algorithmic strategies in order to optimize some sort of system objective. This is a graph that summarizes basically the entire proposal. At the top level, maybe, you can see the type of human behaviors that we are trying to consider, and these include, for example, engagement, availability, appliance perception of importance of appliances, and this, of course, may have different meanings, and we are collaborating with social scientists in order to understand what does it mean, the importance and perception that each user may have of different appliances, and also psychological processes, such as, for example, the bounded rationality or the response fatigue, etc., that may happen over time. Also, how opinions are formed as users interact with appliances. Then these are connected to several tasks that are proposed in the career proposal, and these, for example, include user-centered active learning for appliance recognition, perceived value optimization of energy consumption, methods in order to allow users to exchange energy taking into account their perception of profit and loss, etc. And then there is a significant educational component that includes a collaboration with a local high school in order to have high school students that come to our lab and work with us. I already had a couple of those. There is also a collaboration with the Cardinal Valley Elementary High School and the my university Society of Hispanic Engineers in order to have periodic seminars that expose elementary students from a diversity group to the topics of these proposals. And unfortunately, these have not started yet due to the pandemic, and hopefully now things can actually start recovering. I also proposed a BPC plan, kind of a mini BPC plan in this career proposal, which wasn't required, but actually I think it was kind of a positive contribution that I provided at that time. And basically, I'm going to join the Start Ignite program in order to bring a cohort of undergraduate students to a minority diversity conference, such as, for example, Grace Hopper. And then, of course, there are some other standard activities like training graduate students, making a new class, etc. Okay, and then regarding the evaluation, we are going to use realistic, there you go. Realistic simulators. We have developed already a smart outlet system. We have deployed this smart outlet system in the solar village at Missouri S&T. We actually have performed experiments with the inhabitants of these houses as well. And there is also a collaboration through the Power and Energy Institute of Kentucky, which I'm a member of, with other companies in order to deploy some of these solutions in the net zero houses in Williamsburg, Kentucky. And again, this has been for now delayed due to the pandemic. Okay, I just want to give you a brief overview of some of the results that we recently have. For example, we have designed power conservation strategies based on HVAC and reverse auction in order to trying to prevent blackouts from occurring and to reduce peak loads. And one of the techniques that we are constantly using by collaborating with social scientists are surveys. And some of these surveys are online surveys, and you can see one there on the top left corner. And we have involved, I would say more or less at this time, thousands of subjects over time in order to study different aspects of the solutions that we are developing. And we have also used real subjects with real people, for example, in the inhabitants of the houses that I mentioned before. We have also published a paper on interactive and adaptive learning approach for appliance recognition, and this was actually a paper authored by an RU student that then became a graduate student and was funded by the CPS proposal as well. We have designed some strategies to exchange energy among users in a microgrid. And finally, we also studied the perceived value optimization of energy consumption in a smart home, again in collaboration with social scientists as well. Then I want to thank all my students that I have now and had in the past that really made this possible. And some of them decided to go to industry, some of them decided to go to graduate school. And then finally, this is just the list of publications that we had over the years. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So that was really great to hear about the research that we're in these career grants. Now we'll open the floor for a Q&A. So you can ask the four panelists any questions you want about writing a career proposal, working with students, coming up with ideas. What's the difference between this and a regular project? Don't be... Did it go off? Okay, who's going to ask the first question? Oh, here we go. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We'll start. We can line up, ask questions.
Hello. I have a quick question about faculty that has research that might be applicable to a number of programs. So for those faculty, it might be hard to see whether you want to apply for a specific program or you might want to see if your proposal could be co-funded by multiple programs. I was wondering if you got into that dilemma, and if so, what was the thought process in choosing the way that you chose?
Is this you're asking more like where to submit? Like should you submit it to CPS or a core program?
So for instance, the career might be co-funded by CPS and EPCN per se. So for faculty that might do that or just go for just CPS, I was wondering what should the thought process be so that you determine whether you want to go for a co-funded project or whether you want to just apply to one of these programs?
Well, I think I could answer that, or Dave could, or maybe someone else. But I think that when you write it, you're writing it for what you want to do in your research. If it's applicable to CPS research, which is, there's a list, but it has to be CPS. that's probably a good place to send it. If you think it's core, like maybe something on electric energy, maybe it would be EPCN, or maybe it's purely control theory, then you would probably submit to EPCN, or there are other programs in size also. I don't know, Dave, if you want to, yeah, maybe Dave will come up here because he has a lot more experience with the careers, and then you guys can answer too after Dave.
So what you really need to think of. So EPCN does careers, CPS is careers, and primarily CPS careers are funded by size, okay? So one, if it's really deeply EPCN, that's got to be your answer. And who do you interact with? Do you interact mostly with EPCN program officers? Where do you submit proposals to? In part, it's kind of what relationships and what history do you have with your research? That should, to me, that should be your guide. Okay, and the other thing is, and I'm sure it was discussed earlier, is probably the most common mistake is creating a career proposal that just comes across as a 3-year CPS project. So one, go where you think, so it's obviously first, go where you think you have your best chance. And if you've submitted lots to EPCN and had success there, that should be kind of your answer.
Sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, this is a question for the panelists. If you could comment a little bit about, because we get 3 tries at the career, so what try did it take you, and then how did your proposal evolve over those tries based on the feedback that you received from the reviewers?
It's got to turn red. It's the one with the voice.
Thank you. So I can share my own experience. I had a couple of projects that I was thinking about the career, and the question I was asking myself, which one is really closer to my heart, and this is the one that I'm going to continue not only for 5 years, and probably even I was thinking about a 10-year plan. So as Linda mentioned, for each of them, I had other NSF proposals and grants before. So for one of them, I had a CCRI that really helped me to hire the students, build up some results. For another one, I had a core program project that helped me build up the result, make the connection with domain scientists, understand the problem correctly, and based on that and the feedback that I got during those proposals, I find a good plan for career. I understood what are the problems that hasn't been addressed yet, and how I can contribute that is unique and hasn't been addressed before.
Yeah, so I just want to mention that I also spent a lot of time reading successful career proposals and attending their talks. And I actually did my first tutorial very late because I was what I got from that, the evaluation, also being on the panels, is very important to show that you have some preliminary work or you have developed your story very well. So I can show also you can carry the research, and it's actually kind of something that you want to do in your career. So I think once you're ready, that's the time to apply. So that was what I understood from the. I had one case of a PCAS award that was very well written proposal, and they all had very good story, very preliminary work that supported their proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I got the career funded on the second try. I think the first proposal that I wrote, the scope was actually probably too broad, and it was there were some areas that were not really fleshed out very well. So I spent a lot of time, I pretty much started fresh. I didn't really look at the old proposal after that. And I started earlier. I spent more time kind of talking with people and making sure I could tell a very short, concise story this time, which I couldn't really do last time. And looking at a lot of proposals, not just career proposals, and making sure that what I was doing was not overlapping, but was complementary in some way. And of course, the feedback from the program managers was very helpful too.
So I also got it on the second try, and the main issue that I had from the first try, I mean, if you have heard my presentation, my proposal has some sort of interdisciplinary flavor. And so this is kind of a challenge for a career proposal because you are kind of in between. And the comment I remember I got was that maybe this is not a right topic for a career proposal, which freaked me out completely. I mean, thankfully that wasn't my first CPS proposal. Before I got a couple, so I was already more or less involved in the community. But at the same time, when you go from a general proposal to a specific career proposal, the expectations are different. And so I reached out to David and Jonathan at that time. And we had, a very, very useful conversation about what should we do with this proposal, because I didn't know if, even I should keep it. And I mean, it was great. So I mean, thanks for their suggestion, and then the suggestion, of course, also other faculty that I reached to. I was able to improve it and frame it much more as a career, basically, and try to reduce this issue.
Thank you.
One of the things that I always really try to get across to people, it's like in that Hamilton, you don't want to waste a shot. And truly, you only have 3 chances. Your first shot, in my mind, should be after you've actually talked to some program directors and really got a feel for what the program is about. You can go to the CPS VO, and one of the things that you can do there is you can see lightning talks for all the career proposals that we've made. And frankly, if I were going to write myself a career proposal, the homework that I would do would be to really look at those and listen and see why that idea is not just a regular 3-year project. So I would encourage you to talk to a program director, make sure that that your interests align with the program, and that you're really talking about foundation, what's going to be a research area within the CPS core that you're going to build on top of as a foundation for your for your career. What we'd never kind of like to see is I'm doing a drive-by on CPS. I failed in this one, I failed here, I went to one division, went to another division, and I'm going to go to CPS thinking they're easy marks. We're not. We're looking at what is the basic elements of your research, and how does it really align with the program. And when we say align with the program, since most CPS awards are funded by size, look at what the core research area is and make sure it's an area that we're going to go, hey, this is great stuff. Like I said, call us. We like, this is a part of the job that we really enjoy. We never enjoy telling a PI, hey, sorry, this was your last chance and you blew it. Panels don't know what chance it is, okay? Panels don't know that you've applied 1 or 2 or 3 times. And in fact, you kind of should erase your memory of those tries, because each time it's a new proposal. And, think about what the panel summary, if you applied to CPS before, think about what it said and have a good, candid discussion with the program director, because they'll generally give you an unvarnished perspective, which is really what you want to hear. You don't want to hear you did great, but sorry. Okay? Any other questions? We got 39 seconds.
I think I'm surprised that this has not been asked before, but a really quick overview. What is your experience in terms of integrating research and education, which is one of the unique aspects of the career proposal and usually the hardest thing to do for somebody that is writing it? Thanks.
So, integrating research and education is a vital part of the career proposal. You've got to tell a story how you're really taking the results of your research, and to some degree, what we and think of it from the panel perspective. What they want to see is that you're doing something that goes a little beyond the ordinary thing. The ordinary thing is, hey, I'm including the results of my research in my graduate courses. Everyone's going to do that. What's going to make you stand out at something different? You should think about that. And the other part is panels are going to be looking at your intellectual merit. I mean, that's going to be, broader impact, integration with education is very important. But if your intellectual merit ain't there, you're kind of in trouble.
I think another thing to keep in mind with the educational activities is it's also kind of a career proposal for those. So you're thinking these education courses you're developing, outreach activities, these are things that will lay the foundation for continuing to do those for years after the award. And I think toward the beginning, Linda was talking about the idea of excitement, and I think that should hopefully show through in the educational activities as well. Like, this is going to be really great for the students, it's great for the community. That should show up just as much in the education as the research.
Yeah, I would like to add too that, you need to have, as David just said, so something which is a little bit out of the box, something that is extraordinary, compared to a regular graduate class or teaching a graduate student. But in order to come up with these out-of-the-box ideas, you need to have a little bit experience and time spent in this profession. So that's probably another reason why it's not a good idea to submit the career proposal as your first proposal, and honestly, it's even your first funded proposal. So get some other proposals, work with them, create collaboration with your community, with the schools or other initiatives that are present in your university, and then from that, build on this experience in order to develop the educational plan. And another thing that I did, and this is a very personal type of writing thing that I did, so I tried to connect each research task with an educational component. So instead of writing the proposal as this is research and this is education, I wrote something like research, education, research, education, research, education. Try to connect every research component to some sort of educational activity. Of course, sometimes the tide will be stronger, sometimes the contribution will be bigger, sometimes it will be smaller, but I try to put everything together so there is really a tight education between these two things.
Those are all great points, and be creative. Be creative, and don't get we'll have a panel, some number of proposals. Make sure that you don't bore the reviewer. That's the worst thing that you could do is write your career proposal and the reviewers both either get bored or think, hey, there's nothing out of the ordinary here. Okay?
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we're actually going to take 45 minutes for lunch. I like to take a longer lunch break. I don't know about you guys, but 30 minutes seemed a little too short for me. Okay. And then make sure you're back in 45 minutes because we have a fantastic keynote speaker coming up next. Okay. Thank you, guys.